Come with me to a magical place where being labeled the Pork Queen is a compliment, where being nice is just a way of life, and where all leaders of the free world must pass through. Welcome to Iowa. Whether you're a current Iowan, an Iowa expat, or an Iowan at heart, this show is for you. This is the Iowa Podcast. Real Iowans, real talk, no drama. I'm Justin Brady, and the ISU Iowa game is over. And at least for the next, I don't do math, 360 some days or so, it will be a cyclone state, whether you like it or not. Now, full disclosure, my parents, my dad, my brother are Hawkeyes. However, even I have to concede that it is a cyclone state, at least for the next year. Everybody wants to know what was different this year. What was different? Why did the Cyclones win? And we actually have the answer today for you. It was the uniforms. And the person responsible for that decision, so you owe him the victory, Cyclone fans, is John Sedgwick, who joins us today, the Director of Equipment Operations for Iowa State University Athletics. Thank you for coming in here, John.
Hey, great. Thank you for having me today. I don't know if I can take all the credit here, but no, definitely we try to make them look good when they go on the field, and if that helps, then, hey, we've done our job.
I'm going to give you all the credit, just, for the record. But there is, by the way, little side note, there is this thing called sensation transference. It's this psychological thing, and it's basically like, if it's dressed well, we expect it to do better. And there is also the thing where, if people are dressed well for an interview, they feel better about themselves, they feel more confident. So there actually may be more to that than we both realize. Maybe we should...
I totally agree. I had to look good coming in here today myself.
Yeah, you had the shoes. I don't know if you can can you show the shoes to the camera? I don't know if that's even possible.
I can get that up there. I'm not sure if I'm that flexible.
You're pretty flexible. So I want to talk to you about the new uniforms and the process behind them. Everyone saw the cool blacked out uniforms, the black and white ones, which are super cool. But there are obviously home, away, different colors. And so tell us just about the new look and kind of some of the special features in a uniform that people probably don't really think about. It's not just like they got a t-shirt and they put the t-shirt on. Right. There's a lot that goes into this. What are some of the cool what are some of the cool things?
Yeah. So, it's definitely a process. It's years in the making, really, to get from point A to point B and really kind of get to where we want to go with the different uniforms. And that's really for any sport. And, but really we'd had some changes coming in when Coach Campbell first started here. Mm-hmm. We knew that we were going to eventually get to a black uniform.
Oh.
We kind of went from our traditional look a bit with the cardinal gold, of course,
yep.
And changed it up first with the gray uniform, or the anthracite uniform, mm-hmm. if you recall that. And
anthracite.
It looked, that anthracite's like that dark gray. That's what Nike calls it. Yeah. Yep. And so that was really our first alternate, our first change was going to that anthracite uniform and still having the same look as our cardinal and gold with the stripes on the shoulders and all that kind of stuff. So that was really kind of our first step. And then eventually we came out with the black and the white ones, which, depending who you were and what side you're on of the rivalry and all that kind of stuff, people loved it, people hated it. But regardless, I think it's a pretty clean look.
It is.
And it looks good on the field. The numbers really pop off of it. And, it looks great when they're coming out of the tunnel and all that stuff too. So, but yeah, really where I'm trying to go with it is that it's not really like something you can just do overnight. It's a long process, years in the making. And really with this newest uniform, it really kind of started from, we were wanting to change the numbers on the red uniform from yellow to white. We actually started wearing our white pants more often with our red jersey. And just to have that whole thing flow a little bit more, we wanted to change the yellow to white so it flows with the white pants a little bit better. Mm-hmm. So it's just like little things like that most people probably wouldn't even think about or know about. And we wanted to change those numbers from gold to the white. But then kind of coming along was this chassis change that we had coming along as well.
Chassis change?
So that's what Nike calls our uniform.
And Nike being the collaborative partner, their designers are helping you create this stuff.
Yep. And so basically the chassis is the actual specific uniform that we are wearing. And there's many different chassis. Maybe
I'm learning so much.
I know it's crazy. It's like, and most people aren't even going to know this. But like maybe it's a lighter material here or there, or maybe there's more mesh on this part of the uniform compared to other chassis. So really that's what it's all about. Different materials, making up the jersey, the pants, and all that kind of stuff. So we were due for like a new updated chassis.
Oh, so where the mesh is, where the stretch
all those
points
different
are.
parts of things. Exactly.
Goodness, I didn't think about all that.
And, you know, Nike always is updating theirs and every few years or whatever. And so we were kind of due for that. And that was going to be our opportunity to change the numbers. That was our original plan, to change the numbers from the yellow to the white. All of a sudden it became, well, hey, this is our chance to really put it to something different.
Right.
We wanted to get that classic look.
I mean, it looks cool. And you mentioned, I want to go back to this. You said two year?
Yeah, it takes a couple of years.
2 year process? So this isn't like you clicking around on Photoshop, showing everybody in the athletic department, and they're like, yeah, it looks good, let's do it. That's not it at all.
It can sometimes start with that.
Yeah, it's the inspiration.
But by the time you get them on the field, it might be 2 years later. So, and really a lot goes in with that, because you're working with Nike probably the first year or several months. You're working with Nike and just making sure, you know, you're going back and forth a lot about like what it is you specifically want.
Yeah.
Whether they can do it, whether they can't do it, and making sure all that lines up. And then you have to start kind of getting your order placed ahead of time enough that Nike's able to order enough of the material for their factories. Then,
wow.
So then they get their material and then they can start making everything. And then eventually, you know, it takes a matter of time for them to make everything. And especially when we're doing a whole chassis change and we're changing every jersey, every pant. That's a lot of jerseys and pants that they're having to make for us in this one particular year. So it takes longer than normal.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, eventually we have to get them a roster, a final roster. And then that's when they start putting the specific numbers to the specific names and all that kind of stuff. So there's such a big, long process.
So I want to touch into the roster and the individual names here a little bit later, but you mentioned that this is a collaborative process with Nike, and their designers are working with your coaching staff, your equipment people like yourself, obviously. Right. So you have like, how do these meetings go? Like, I want to know how these meetings go, and you're talking with their designers, I'm assuming. You're sharing like visuals and mock-ups and designs.
Right.
Like, what is the priority here? Is it 100% design focused? Are there some practical aspects to it? You mentioned like these look good when they're coming out of the breezeway or whatever. Are all these things considered, like different angles on the, you know, like how will it look in photography? How's it going to look on TV? Are all these things part of the process?
It's funny because I think there's two different sides of it. There's Nike's side of it and there's our side of it. And from our side of it, we might just be more generic. And we're like, hey, we want a classic look. Like maybe we want like this retro look or, you know, some stripes that make it look like that.
Yeah.
Where Nike kind of comes at us with their designers that are kind of thinking about all this stuff from a different, you know, state of mind than what we think about it. And they're like, I remember the first time we did the redesign and we had the meetings with them and they're like asking Coach Campbell, like what kind of car he thought his program would be if it was a car. To try to get like an idea of like, I can't remember what it was. It was some old classic, you know, like power car or whatever, right? And muscle car. And, you know, so that's the questions that they're asking.
Yeah.
And we're kind of just like, you know, we just want some stripes here or there, whatever, you know? So like we're trying to like meet this common ground of the thinking that we're trying to come from and really kind of go from there and see, you know, what we can come up with. So really the redesign that we did a number of years ago, once Coach Campbell had been here a year or two, I believe, that was kind of more so Nike's designers kind of coming up with, you know, us telling them, hey, we want something unique with a cyclone element to it.
Yeah.
And let's see what you guys come up with. And this time it was more kind of us driven where we're like, we kind of know really the look we want. You guys help us get to it. So yeah,
that's classic. Really that's interesting because you have mentioned it right at the beginning. It has this very classic look, and that may, in part, or maybe a major part of that, was inspired by Coach Campbell himself talking about like a classic car look that he liked a few years ago.
Yeah.
And so these design decisions aren't just completely random and it's like, oh, whatever, click, here's a black uniform, now we're done.
Right.
These are very much inspired from Coach Campbell and from your leadership and from yourself. These things are a pretty labor-intensive process.
Yeah, that's why it probably takes 2 years. But yeah, no, it's an awesome process to actually be a part of. It's a fun process to be a part of because you're hearing all these different sides of it, like Nike's side where they're talking about what's your story. And we're just like, man, we saw this and this looks awesome. And we want to kind of try to get to whatever that might be. So you're really trying to put all this stuff together, and it's a pretty interesting process just being a part of it.
What's your story? What does that mean?
Yeah, it's kind of like what Nike's side of it is. That's when you talk to them, they say, what's your story? What's the story we're trying to tell about Iowa State and the Cyclones that we can put into this uniform? So, and again, for us, we might just be like, hey, we want some accents here or some stripes here, or give us this classic look. But yeah, Nike's kind of calls it, hey, what's your story? So what's all about, like Iowa State all about? What's the Cyclones all about? So.
Yeah, so I mean, all the videos, all the highlight reels, all the photos, the reason these look really cool and the reason these colors pop against multiple backgrounds, like we see the cool photos that some of these photographers take in game. And the reason that that stuff pops and looks really cool is because 2 years before that photo was taken, a lot of people in the program and at Nike were thinking about what's it going to look like when someone reaches for that like game-winning catch or they're driving to make a touchdown. What's that going to look like in film and photo later? That's why this stuff, at least in part, obviously athletes being at their best is something that inspires every American all the time. But in part, the reason the colors work is because someone was working on that years out.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. There really is something to, if you look good, you play good and all that kind of stuff. Although I usually tell them, like, somebody might come up to me and be like, hey, I need a new pair of gloves so I look good. I'm like, hey, if you go get 2 interceptions, you're going to look good. So go get 5 sacks, go score 3 touchdowns, go get 100 yards rushing. You're going to look good.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, though, there's definitely something to it, and definitely something from our perspective as far as like, the staff's perspective. We want them looking good. We want,
of course,
our team looking great out there on the field. We want people to say like, hey, those guys look awesome. Those uniforms are fire. And, what's Iowa State going to come up with next? Those kinds of things. So.
Yeah. Are there any illegal things? Like not illegal in like you're breaking a law, but are there any illegal things where you're like, we want to put this on our uniform. We want this color, or we want like a grid, a checkerboard grid to really confuse people in the out, when like confuse the opposition, or like we want to camouflage our players. We want to make them blend into the background with all the crowds. Right. And, are there any things that are off limits? That
honestly, like nothing comes to mind.
Really? Well, you heard it here first.
There probably is something. I mean, I work with basketball mostly right now, and we do have some rules over there where like our base layer gear has to be a certain color under the uniform. So, I mean, there's certain things like that with different sports here and there. But yeah, as far as like making, you know what? Here's one. The numbers do have to pop enough. They have to be contrasting enough.
Oh, so that officials can
can see it, and people top of the stands can see and all that kind of stuff. So
that makes sense.
A few years ago, there was a newer rule where like some of the basketball teams were having maybe a black uniform with just an outline of the number, and it was really actually hard to see those numbers. So NCAA kind of came up with a new rule, and actually it might have been an existing rule, and they re-emphasized it, but it had to be the whole number. You couldn't just do the outline of the number because it's just too hard to see.
Sure, so. And if you're going to throw a flag on a play or something, you need to know which number did it.
Exactly. Yep.
That's super funny. One of the other things I want to know, we'll get to it now. Who does the cleaning on this stuff? Is it you or?
Yeah, that's us. That's our staff. That's the equipment guys.
So no. I mean you personally.
What's that?
Do you have to go in there, washer and dryer, or are these hung dry, or can you put them in a dryer?
We hang dry. We do a lot of hang drying with uniforms. We don't want those things shrinking or anything like that. So
so you mentioned something earlier that was actually interesting. You mentioned getting the names on the uniforms, and I also think about like the transfer portal and that. Like it's okay. So you have this 2-year process. You're designing all these uniforms. As everybody knows, people come in different shapes and sizes. Mm-hmm. Even you take 10 guys that are in peak physical perfection, they're still all different shapes and sizes. the diameters of their biceps, their calf, everything is different. And so how you don't know who's coming to your team 2 years out. So how does this work? Do you have like some base sizes and then you tailor them in with your staff, or do you have like special rush order stuff for individual sizes? How does this process work?
Yeah, it's not an easy part of being an equipment manager, that's for sure. Like we're ordering things for people that we don't even know who they are, let alone their sizes, because we're that far out.
Right.
So there's definitely an element of ordering extra. We have a lot of blank, like the jerseys might come in without numbers and without the names, obviously, because we don't know who's going to be wearing it.
And then you stitch those on.
And then we will stitch them on or have somebody else stitch them on for us. So, because Nike usually asks for like, it used to be a quote unquote final roster like in February or March to start putting all that stuff on. We can't do that anymore. There's still, transfer windows are happening after that. So, we get the majority of them, or as most as we can, done then. You probably know at least 85, 90, 95% of the guys by that point. But those last few, might have to scramble a little bit here and there to make sure that all gets done. So it's not an easy part of the process. The transfer portal is definitely made it even tougher on us a bit. But it could be like guys that are already on the team. Like you might have a guy that had a crazy offseason and gained 30 pounds, and now he's got to have a different size jersey because he got huge all of a sudden.
Sure.
So that's something too where we got to take in effect and just make sure we've got enough extras on hand that we can change the guy out if we need to.
So you do have some we have
some wiggle room here.
Yeah, like a uniform library of sorts.
Pretty much, yeah.
Where this individual will put him in this size shirt, this size jersey.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know what the term is. This size pants. And then do you do a little bit of tailoring if needed then?
We actually don't do too much.
So the sizes are flexible enough.
Yeah,
okay.
And they're really tight fitting as you can tell most of the time, but they are flexible enough at the same time that we don't really have to do too much tailoring. So there might be an extreme every now and then, or maybe you get like a really short guy that we're gonna have to cut off some of the jersey. But yeah, it's not too often we have to do too much custom tailoring.
Sure. And I know that one of the things that people are always wondering about, it seems to come up every year in football season, is the helmets and like cranial injuries. So I'm assuming I don't think Nike does the helmets, right?
Correct. No.
Yeah. It's another, what's the brand that does the helmets?
There's several of them. There's Rydell, there's Schutt that, do these different helmets for us. And that's changed a lot too, really in the last 10 years. Like so many of them are customized now.
Sure. I've noticed that the helmet shapes and sizes and design aren't the same thing.
No, yeah,
like some of them are different. Some of them have different grill guards or whatever. Everybody on the show knows that I'm like sports illiterate. Like I know like certain rules and stuff,
right? But
as far as terms, I'm kind of a moron. Sorry, everybody. But like some of them I've noticed that have this weird flap in the front. I don't know if you can explain that, but it's if you look at some of these players, it's like the front of the helmet has a downward facing flap, and it's like it's a cut. And it's basically a flap, and it's slightly elevated just a little bit. And I've always wondered, is that a vent of some kind, or is it what is that?
It gives a little bit of flex to the helmet,
mm-hmm.
And especially right there, especially with linemen too, like they're hitting each other more often than guys that are outside or not on the line. So that kind of helps with those guys a little bit, as far as gives a little bit of flex to the helmet. So the helmet is trying to absorb the hit more than it transferring to your head. So it's just another safety aspect of those helmets.
So it's trying to distribute the force across the entire helmet versus like if you have just for the sake of argument, if you have like a perfectly probably steel would bend actually easier than what you have. But if you have an unbendable helmet and someone knocks into that, a lot of that force is still transferring roughly in the same general area it came from the outside. So you're trying to distribute that across the entire helmet, not the person's head.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're trying to do as much as you can initially to actually deflect the hit itself, and then whatever is actually from the hit that is being taken on by the helmet, to then spread that out so it's not going to your head as much as possible, or neck, or.
Do you have like accelerometers in some of these helmets? Do you have like testing that you do to make sure players say? I mean, I know that you make sure player safety is a concern. I obviously know that, but just I don't want to spend too much time on it. But is there a general process that you have? Do you review footage to make sure that, people aren't getting injured? What's that process look like?
I mean, first and foremost, the most
it's a pretty rough sport. Like, if you don't know that already.
The most important part of our job is fitting the athletes. Fitting them correctly with the helmets and shoulder pads. Because if we don't fit them correctly, they're that much more prone to getting injured.
Oh, so the fit also makes them safer.
Yeah, we have to make sure they're in the right fitting stuff. We can't have something that's too big, too small, those kinds of things. So that's really the first part. Now, there are some companies that do, like, they have this system where it's you can put it in each side or in the side each helmet where it can pick up all these hits. So
really? So they have little sensors and accelerometers and stuff.
Yeah. So there's, you see the big hits. You see those. Everybody sees those, like a linebacker coming in and crushing a wide receiver that was going over the middle. But you don't necessarily see the smaller hits that a lot of the players take maybe almost every single play. So it's trying to, see how much those hits really rack up, and it can keep track of how many there are, and supposed to keep track of how hard they are as well. So
yeah, because some of these hits are deceptive.
Yeah,
like you see something on a replay and there's a flag in the play, and you're like, why? That was nothing. Like what? Why are we stopping a play for? Like, why is that player down from an injury? Like, oh, you weakling. Like, what is wrong with you? Get up. That's ridiculous. And then you see the high speed and you're like, holy cow, I did not see any of that. Because when someone takes a huge hit, muscles rebound pretty quickly, and so you don't really notice just how jarring some of these hits are. And you're not watching high speed footage during the entire game. Maybe you'll review it later. Do you have then in your helmets and uniforms a bunch of sensors? So
it's something we've kind of haven't necessarily needed to take on.
Yeah, you've tested it maybe, but you don't have it currently.
By the time it's getting to us, we know it's a great product.
Yeah.
And it's doing its job. So, and also there's a lot of times during practice where we're not even necessarily hitting each other that hard. So, it's something we haven't really taken on, just with knowing that when we fit them safely in the products that we have, that they're going to be pretty good, unless it's like some kind of crazy giant shot like we've talked about.
Right. Any uses of AI at all in college football athletics yet?
I'm
assuming it's coming for coaching and strategy. I know it's already here.
Yeah.
But do you guys work with it on a daily basis at all?
The closest we get to that maybe is a lot of these helmets now are custom fit, and their heads are scanned with, we can do it with our cell phones now. And it's pretty crazy. And so it's they put on this special little skimpy hat or something they pull over their head, and then we can go walk around them, scan their head, and it kind of gets a read of their head, and then we can send that information off, and they can kind of build a helmet to fit that head or that unique shape or whatever it might be. So
you got to be kidding me.
Yeah, it's
so you're basically taking digital molds of your players' heads to fit them for the right helmet.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is wild.
It kind of takes a lot of the guessing out for us too.
Of course it does.
And really gives them that fit. And I remember when we first started doing this, gosh, it was probably 5 or 6 years ago now. And guys putting those once they get the helmet back and they put it on for the first time, they're just floored with
it fits
perfect and doesn't move. And it was an awesome thing to be a part of.
That is cool. So I have wondered. I'm like, man, that would be irritating with this helmet flopping all over your head all the time. Mm-hmm. Like, how do you even focus on anything?
Yeah, but these are again, all it never should do that in the first place, because if we're fitting them correctly, it shouldn't do that anyway. So. That
is crazy. So are you using iPhones with light sensors? Because they have this LiDAR sensor. Maybe this is too nerdy for some people, but but for those that don't know, iPhones, I don't know if Pixels have this. I used to have a Google Pixel, great phone, totally other topic. But iPhones have a LiDAR sensor. One of those little sensors in the back of your phone is a LiDAR sensor. It's shooting tiny little light particles at things. Those are bouncing back, and it can build models. So are you using LiDAR to do this? You mentioned you're scanning people. So is it always like an iPhone that you're using?
I think it's mostly actually just more of an iPad. You can do it on your phone through iPad, and it's got some handles and everything. So it's a little easier to walk around.
So you have a device that you use for that.
Yeah, and it's just that program. I couldn't tell you exactly what it's picking up and all that. But it's pretty amazing once it maps it out, and then you can see that. And another little cool aspect about it too is each guy will then give their signature and write a signature on the iPad, and then that will actually be on the inside of their helmet too.
Oh, gotta be kidding me!
So that's actually one of the really cool little aspects. That's like nobody knows that because it's on the inside of the helmet too.
It's their special little thing.
Yeah, it's that that is definitely Rocco Beck's helmet because it says his name on it. So.
Dude, that is really cool. I'm assuming the little you mentioned the hoodie they have or the little sock they put over their head. I'm assuming that's to like flatten any hair.
Correct. Yeah.
So that you actually get a cranial scan, not just a scan of their hair.
Yeah, because the hair doesn't really affect the fit of the helmet too much unless you have some crazy huge hair.
That pretty much compresses down.
Yeah, exactly. So really, it's just trying to get your skull and get a good read on that.
That is incredible. Can we get, I mean, you can say no, but can we get some photos of like these signatures, like what that looks like?
Oh, yeah.
Is that okay?
That should be easy. I think we can do something like that.
We'll post those to iowapodcast.com for those that are, listening to this or watching on YouTube or X. We'll make sure to post some of those to the website. That's actually really, really cool. Everybody wants to know though, because you mentioned 2-year process and we are designing these per play. Okay, that's cool. But how do special games work then? Because you come from, I think your previous job was with the Army?
I was at Army, yeah, Army football.
And they do
West
a
Point,
special, you were telling me this ahead of time, they do a special Army, Navy, obviously special Army versus Navy, and they have special uniforms just for that game.
Right.
So how does that, you're planning this stuff 2 years out too?
Yeah, exactly. That's a 2-year process ongoing all the time because they have a new uniform every year. And
every year. And if it's a 2-year lead time.
Yeah. So they're always working on
you're always working on 2 uniforms.
Next year's plus 2 years out.
Oh my gosh.
So and that was a really cool process to be there. And that's kind of there at the beginning of when we started that whole process. Our first uniform we did was we had camo pants, a black jersey with camo numbers.
That's cool.
And then a camo helmet.
Oh.
And it was like nobody had done anything like that before. It took a long time just to figure out how we were even physically going to be able to do this, like with Nike, like how are we doing this? And with our helmet companies, how are we making a camo helmet? And they ended up with the helmets. They were like going back and forth. Do we hand paint them? Do we, is it a bunch of different decals that we put together on the helmet to make it look camo? And they ended up coming up with a dipping process, which
I've seen this.
Yeah, I think a lot of hunters might use that to maybe camouflage their guns, or maybe car parts. You can do different parts and dip it and make it look really cool. So yeah, basically they just had this camo design, and then they would dip the helmet down into the basin with the chemicals, and the chemicals would seep through that design and then go onto the helmet, and then it's like instantly too. It's all of a sudden it's a camo helmet. So
that is incredible.
It was pretty cool.
That is so. I'm assuming those are online too. I'm gonna look for pictures of these camo outfits and put those on the website
you can find
too.
Those pretty easy,
that is super cool.
Yeah.
Next step for ISU will be camouflaging to meet the background of the crowd so that they disappear on the field.
That'd be cool.
And then training your guys to pick out people, that, and then really mess with everybody. Yeah, that'd tick everybody off.
Exactly. Yeah, that'd be awesome. Any element we can get for surprise or for. Buy us some time to get a good pass or whatever. That'd be great.
So you came with the basketball gear.
Correct. Yeah.
On. Have you announced basketball uniforms yet?
No, we haven't done anything lately with basketball uniforms.
So is there something coming up?
Yeah, Nike has reached out to us recently saying that there will be a chassis change coming up.
So if they've reached out to you now, we're 2 years from the Iowa State University basketball league.
Exactly. And that's just if we decide to change anything at that point. So we literally just at the front end of this, we've had our current basketball uniforms for, it's getting beyond maybe 8 or 10 years now, which is a little bit longer than normal as far as chassis changes go.
Yeah.
So a change, COVID kind of affected some of that.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yep.
So what I'm hearing is a change is coming.
Yeah, or at least potential to.
Potential.
Yep, potential to.
I heard that it's happening.
Oh, that's what I heard. That'd be awesome. Do you have any cool ideas that we should go with?
Yeah, spots.
Spots.
Yeah,
okay.
Definitely polka dots. Okay. Definitely yellow and red polka dots for sure.
See what the guys think about that.
Oh yeah, it will deflate their drive. They will be embarrassed to step on the court, and you'll just say, "Hey, you're gonna have to prove yourselves now."
Yeah, they might want to.
You have to get over the humiliation. It's good character building.
Yeah, maybe it's something they use for practice.
Probably don't listen to me on this stuff. That's if there's one thing you should take away from this, John, it's don't listen to me on uniform designs. Just last question: football, basketball. Do the coaches have any special gear at all? Any non-athletes, like the support staff, do they also have special gear, and does it go through a similar process?
Sure. So yeah, basically our ordering process for all of our apparel is actually not too unsimilar from the uniforms.
Wow,
it
okay.
starts 18 months out from
Goodness.
when we actually get it in hand, and we're getting these designs from Nike. They come out and meet with us and show us all the different items that we're going to get. And this is the stuff that comes with logos on it already,
Yeah.
and in our color. Because we can also buy stuff that's blank and then put whatever logo we want on it, which is what I did with this piece.
Mm-hmm.
So they're showing us the stuff that basically every Nike school is getting. And, but ours obviously is our Iowa State stuff, has our Iowa State logos on it, and is, our color red or our color yellow or whatever we might want it to be. Whereas, Michigan State's, when they go to Michigan State, it's going to be the exact same looking piece, but it's going to have their logos and be green.
Right.
So, and then every Nike school pretty much has those same things.
That is cool.
So if you kind of look at, and that's really based off the retail world. So those are a lot of the things that you go to the stores and you're going to see in the stores too. So, the whole process starts 18 months out, and we start meeting with Nike and seeing what is going to be, on our athletes and on our coaches.
I had no idea.
Down the road.
I had no idea how insane this process was.
Yep.
I was like, I want to talk about the design thing. I'm sure it's a couple people at ISU that do the design, and then we push it out a couple months later. Nope. We're talking a 2-year process. John Sedgwick, Director of Equipment Operations and real winner of the ISU versus Iowa game. Of course, if you're watching on X or YouTube, you can see the shirt that he's wearing. You can show that to the camera right here. That's pretty cool. I love that. Kind of like the retro.
Yeah, it's the retro or classic or vintage dribbling side that we used to have a long
Super
time
cool.
ago,
John Sedgwick, thank you so much for coming on the Iowa podcast. Absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, hey, great to be here. Yeah, loved it.
And to my fellow Iowans, Iowa expats, and Iowans at heart, thanks for listening and subscribing to the Iowa podcast.